The cool dawn over Eastern Europe broke gently on the horizon, casting a pale light over the vast plains that had become the decisive battleground between empires. A chill hung in the September air, and mist rolled low across the fields around Vienna, where tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers had entrenched themselves for months. The siege that had begun in July was closing in on its final act, and no one on either side yet knew that one of the most extraordinary cavalry charges in human history was only hours away. Within the besieged city, the situation had grown desperate. The defenders, exhausted, starving, and increasingly hopeless, looked out each morning at the massive siege trenches crawling closer like veins carved into the earth. Fires burned in the Ottoman camps. Drums echoed before sunrise, and the sight of the enemy's massive cannons positioned ever nearer to the city walls reminded everyone that Vienna could fall at any moment. To the Ottomans, led nominally by Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, Vienna was not simply another city. It was the gateway to Central Europe and the symbolic prize that would seal Ottoman dominance over the continent. For decades, the empire had expanded relentlessly across the Balkans, and with the fall of Vienna, the path to the heart of Europe would lie open. Kara Mustafa had gathered one of the largest armies the region had ever seen, estimated at more than 80,000 fighting men, and surrounded the city with absolute confidence. Inside the city, the defenders were stretched to the breaking point. Their commander, Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg, had done what he could with limited supplies and dwindling morale. Disease spread through the population, food shortages grew severe, and several sections of the walls had already been damaged by constant bombardment. Each night, the defenders patched holes with earth, timber, and whatever debris they could find. Every hour, they waited for the Ottoman mines' tunnels dug to collapse the walls to take effect. But while Vienna struggled to survive, forces were gathering far beyond the city's site. Across the plains of Poland, King Jan III Sobieski had mobilized his army, driven by urgency and a personal sense of duty. A military genius and national hero, Sobieski was renowned for his mastery of cavalry tactics and his leadership of the famed Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth's elite heavy cavalry, the Winged Hussars. Sobieski had watched the Ottoman advance with growing alarm. He understood that the fall of Vienna would leave Poland vulnerable, destabilize the balance of power, and potentially bring Ottoman forces deeper into Christian Europe. It was not only politics or alliances that motivated him. It was the realization that this moment could shape the continent's destiny for generations. As the Polish army marched south, they were joined by German, Austrian, and other allied forces who understood the stakes. The Holy League army that formed under Sobieski's leadership was smaller than the Ottoman host, but its morale and cohesion were strengthening with each passing day. Among these soldiers, the Winged Hussars stood out a fearsome sight with their long lances, leopard skin cloaks, and towering wings that rattled in the wind. Across the mountains, through rugged paths and dense forests, the Allied armies pushed toward Vienna. Their journey was difficult, and supply shortages threatened to slow them, but the urgency of the mission drove them forward. The Ottomans had no idea how close the coalition was, nor how powerful the coming strike would be. Meanwhile, in the Ottoman camp, discipline was beginning to fray. The endless siege drained morale, and infighting simmered between commanders. Kara Mustafa's hesitancy to launch a final assault on the city, hoping instead to starve Vienna into surrender, caused tension among his officers. Some warned him that relief forces were gathering, but the Grand Vizier dismissed the reports as exaggerated or false. The ground around Vienna bore the scars of months of conflict. Trenches zigzagged toward the walls, earthworks towered along the outskirts, and thousands of tents formed a sprawling maze of Ottoman encampments. Campfires crackled day and night, and the sound of smiths repairing weapons blended with the shouts of soldiers drilling or hauling supplies. Inside Vienna, civilians huddled in cramped quarters, praying that help would arrive before the walls gave way. At night, they could hear the scraping of shovels, underground evidence of Ottoman miners tunneling dangerously close. Explosions occasionally ripped through sections of the wall, shaking the city to its core. Kahlenberg urged his people to hold on a little longer, assuring them that Sobieski would come. As early September approached, subtle signs began to indicate that something had changed. Scouts reported movement in the distant hills, and rumors spread among the defenders that the Polish king himself was leading an army toward the city. Though few dared to believe it, hope flickered within Vienna's weary walls. In the Ottoman camp, however, the looming threat remained largely unrecognized. Kara Mustafa believed that he still controlled the battlefield, and that Vienna would fall before any substantial relief could reach it. His focus remained on preparing for the final assault, unaware that the greatest danger was approaching from behind the hills. On September 11th, the Allied armies finally reached the outskirts of Vienna. They moved into position atop the Kahlenberg Heights, a strategic vantage point from which they could see the entire battlefield, including the sprawling Ottoman army encircling the city. Sobieski surveyed the area, analyzing terrain, troop placement, and the enemy's vulnerabilities. The sight was daunting. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers, siege guns ready to fire, trenches creeping ever closer to Vienna. Yet Sobieski saw an opportunity. The Ottomans were stretched along a long front, with their forces scattered between siege operations and defensive positions. If struck with precision and overwhelming force, they could be broken. The Allied commanders met on the Kahlenberg to discuss strategy. They agreed to attack the next morning. The plan was ambitious. Infantry would push through the Ottoman lines, disrupt their siege works, and weaken their formations. Then, once the time was right, the cavalry would deliver the final blow. Sobieski, with unmatched confidence, predicted a swift and decisive victory. His boldness inspired the commanders around him, who understood they were about to participate in a battle that could define the fate of Europe. As night fell on September 11th, campfires lit up the hills where the Allied forces prepared for the coming clash. Soldiers sharpened blades, checked saddles, and whispered prayers. The Winged Hussars, whose reputation had grown into legend over decades of undefeated charges, readied their long lances en masse. The sound of their armor echoed through the trees. Down below, the Ottomans remained largely unaware of the scale of the threat. Many believed the Christian army arriving on the hills was only a small contingent, not the combined might of several European powers under a single command. Kara Mustafa remained confident, though several Ottoman officers expressed concern. Inside Vienna, the defenders climbed the damaged ramparts and watched torchlight flickering in the hills beyond. Kahlenberg's heart lifted when he saw movement signs that the relief army was indeed assembling. But he knew they must hold one more day. Vienna could not fall during the final hours before salvation arrived. The morning of September 12th began with heavy fog drifting across the valley. The sun rose slowly behind a thin veil of mist, giving the land a dreamlike glow. On the Kahlenberg, thousands of soldiers lined up in formation, waiting for the signal to descend onto the plains. Sobieski rode among them, rallying his men with confident words and a calm presence that steadied their nerves. When the fog began to lift, the Allied infantry advanced first. German, Austrian, and Polish foot soldiers surged down the slopes, clashing with Ottoman skirmishers and forcing the enemy back from their defensive positions. The terrain was rugged and the fighting was fierce, but the Allied advance continued steadily. Gunpowder smoke filled the air as muskets roared across the battlefield. Cannons thundered from both sides, their echoes rebounding through the valley. Clashes erupted along the entire front, from the forests on the right flank to the fortified trenches near Vienna. The Ottomans, startled by the scale of the attack, scrambled to form defensive lines. Their artillery repositioned frantically, and cavalry units rode out to challenge the advancing Europeans. Yet the shock of the sudden assault disrupted their coordination, and confusion spread through the ranks. As the hours passed, the Allied infantry gradually forced the Ottomans backward. But the turning point of the battle had not yet arrived. Sobieski watched from the heights, waiting patiently for the decisive moment. The Winged Hussars stood ready, positioned behind the infantry, their armor glinting in the midday sun. By early afternoon, the Ottomans were struggling to maintain control of the battlefield. Their lines were thinning, their resources stretched, and their commanders overwhelmed by the unrelenting pressure. Kara Mustafa realized too late that he had underestimated the threat, and he rushed reinforcements toward the weakening right flank. On the hills above, Sobieski raised his hand. The time had come. In a single coordinated motion, thousands of cavalrymen mounted up, tightened their reins, and angled their lances forward. The Winged Hussars, alongside other Allied cavalry units, formed into massive ranks. Their wings, a combination of wooden frames and eagle feathers, rustled with a haunting sound that many Ottoman soldiers later remembered with fear. Then the order was given. The cavalry surged forward. The earth shook with the force of the charge. Hooves thundered across the slopes as more than 3,000 Winged Hussars led the largest known cavalry charge in history. The descent from the Kahlenberg was steep, and the momentum built rapidly. With each second, the riders grew faster, unstoppable, unified, and terrifying in their precision. As the cavalry approached the Ottoman lines, enemy soldiers felt the ground vibrating beneath them. Many froze in disbelief. The sight of thousands of armored riders, lances angled like a shimmering forest of steel, wings rattling and banners flying, was overwhelming. The Winged Hussars slammed into the Ottoman ranks with explosive force. The impact shattered the first line of defense instantly. Lances pierced shields and armor. Horses crashed through infantry formations. The disciplined formations of the Ottomans crumbled under the sheer intensity of the charge. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers who had been confident only hours before now fled in terror. The Hussars did not slow. They drove deeper into the heart of the Ottoman camp, scattering enemy forces in every direction. The momentum of their charge carried them across trenches, through artillery positions, and over earthworks that the Ottomans had spent months constructing. Behind the Hussars, other cavalry units joined the assault, swelling the wave of destruction. The Ottomans attempted to regroup, but their formations broke apart faster than they could reorganize. Commanders shouted orders that few could obey amid the chaos. At the center of the charge, King Sobieski himself rode with absolute determination. His presence inspired the cavalry, who followed him without hesitation into the densest parts of the Ottoman defenses. Sobieski knew that this moment would decide the fate of the battle and perhaps the fate of Europe. By late afternoon, the Ottoman army was in full retreat. Kara Mustafa, realizing the catastrophic collapse of his forces, ordered a chaotic withdrawal. Camps were abandoned, artillery left behind, supplies scattered across the fields. Soldiers fled toward the Danube or into the forests, pursued relentlessly by the advancing cavalry. Inside Vienna, cheers erupted as the defenders saw Ottoman soldiers breaking and fleeing. Kahlenberg ordered his men to open the gates and join the pursuit, linking with the Allied forces in a triumphant surge forward. As the sun set over the battlefield, smoke rose from abandoned camps, and the once mighty Ottoman siege collapsed into ruin. The Winged Hussars, bruised and exhausted but victorious, gathered near the city, where Sobieski dismounted and surveyed the battlefield. He had accomplished one of history's greatest military feats. That evening, Sobieski entered Vienna to thunderous applause. The citizens, who only hours before had teetered on the brink of annihilation, hailed him as their savior. Kahlenberg embraced him with emotion, whispering words of gratitude. Sobieski humbly replied, "I came, I saw, and God conquered." The first part of the story ends with Europe forever changed. The siege was broken, the Ottoman expansion halted, and a legend born, the legend of the Winged Hussars, whose charge from the Kahlenberg became the turning point that saved an entire civilization from collapse. And yet, the full story of how this battle reshaped continents, strengthened empires, and defined future borders is still unfolding. In the silent hours after the great clash had ended, the plains around Vienna lay littered with the remnants of one of the most decisive battles in European history. The glow of fires still burned across the abandoned Ottoman camps, casting flickering shadows on toppled tents, broken cannons, and the scattered belongings of an army that had fled in panic. The night breeze carried the faint scent of smoke and gunpowder, mingled with the heavy stillness that follows the end of a monumental struggle. As dawn approached, the Allied soldiers walked among the remnants of the battlefield, grappling with the magnitude of the victory they had achieved. Many were exhausted, some wounded, others exhilarated, yet all understood they had taken part in an event that would echo across centuries. The Winged Hussars, still mounted or resting beside their steeds, remained the awe-striking heroes of the day. Their armor glinted faintly in the rising sun as they gathered near Sobieski's camp for instructions on the coming days. King Jan III Sobieski awoke early, though he had barely slept. His thoughts remained fixed on the consequences of the battle, the future of Europe, and the responsibilities he still carried. Victory had been achieved, but the war was not yet fully over. The Ottomans had retreated, but they were still a formidable empire, and the Allies needed to secure the region before they could celebrate fully. In the city of Vienna, the mood had shifted completely. Once filled with despair, the streets now buzzed with life as people emerged from hiding. Families reunited, soldiers embraced, and churches rang their bells in celebration. The citizens decorated the streets with flowers and banners, creating a living tapestry of gratitude and relief. The city that had withstood months of starvation and fear now breathed freely for the first time in weeks. Kahlenberg, the steadfast commander who had defended Vienna with every ounce of strength he had, walked through the ruined streets surveying the damage. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. Walls were cracked and scorched, and fields beyond the gates were cratered from constant bombardment. Yet despite the destruction, he felt overwhelming gratitude. Vienna had survived. Europe had been saved. Meanwhile, Kara Mustafa Pasha rode far behind his shattered army, consumed by fear and shame. His dream of capturing Vienna, the prize that would secure his legacy, had collapsed in a single afternoon. He knew the consequences of such a failure. In the Ottoman Empire, defeat on this scale was rarely forgiven. His troops, demoralized and scattered, trudged eastward in disorganized lines, haunted by the thunder of the Hussars' charge. In the days following the battle, the Allies focused on securing Vienna and stabilizing the surrounding region. Sobieski held councils with German, Austrian, and other commanders, discussing how to reorganize their armies for the next phase of the campaign. They knew the Ottomans might regroup, and vigilance was essential. Sobieski also met with Emperor Leopold I, who arrived in Vienna several days after the victory. Their meeting was formal, but respectful. Politics complicated their relationship. Tensions had existed between Poland and Austria for years. But Leopold understood that without Sobieski, Vienna would have fallen. Even so, his pride prevented him from giving public credit beyond the minimal diplomatic courtesies. The people of Vienna, however, needed no such restraint. They hailed Sobieski as a liberator, showering him with gifts, songs, and cheers. Children followed him through the streets, mimicking the gallop of hussars, while elders crossed themselves and offered blessings. The king accepted their gratitude with humility, reminding them that it was God who had granted victory. Throughout Europe, news of the battle spread with astonishing speed. Messengers rode to distant courts. Chroniclers recorded eyewitness accounts, and diplomats scrambled to interpret what the triumph meant for the future. In Rome, bells tolled for hours, and the Pope declared the victory a divine miracle. In Paris, The French court reacted with a mixture of relief and strategic contemplation, assessing how the shifting balance of power might affect their ambitions. The Battle of Vienna marked the high point of Sobieski's career. Historians would later compare him to ancient commanders like Alexander and Caesar, praising his strategic brilliance and daring leadership. Yet for Sobieski, the victory was not a personal triumph, but a fulfillment of duty. He returned repeatedly to the words he had spoken in Vienna: God conquered. It was his way of placing humility above glory. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire reeled from the catastrophe. Kara Mustafa reached Belgrade in disgrace, his army exhausted and depleted. Reports of the disaster reached Constantinople, where the Sultan's court reacted with shock and anger. The loss of so many men, the abandonment of cannons and supplies, and the humiliation of the failed siege demanded accountability. In December of that year, Kara Mustafa was executed on the Sultan's orders. The fall of Vienna was deemed too severe a failure to forgive, and the Grand Vizier's death symbolized the beginning of a long decline in Ottoman influence over Central Europe. The empire would continue fighting for decades, but its momentum had been irrevocably broken. In the weeks following the battle, the Allied forces advanced cautiously eastward to clear remaining Ottoman positions. They liberated towns that had fallen under Ottoman control and pushed back smaller detachments that attempted to regroup. Though the Ottomans still controlled much of the Balkans, the psychological advantage had shifted decisively to the Europeans. For the people living in the shadow of Ottoman rule, the victory at Vienna offered renewed hope. Communities that had endured decades of fear and uncertainty now looked to Sobieski and the Holy League as protectors. Resistance movements grew, inspired by the news that even the mightiest Ottoman armies were not invincible. Sobieski himself became a central figure in this resurgence. His correspondence during this period reveals a man deeply aware of the historic significance of what had occurred, but also conscious of the political complexities that followed. He understood that maintaining unity among European powers would be difficult, especially as old rivalries resurfaced once the immediate threat had passed. Within Vienna, efforts to rebuild began almost immediately. Craftsmen repaired fortifications, masons reconstructed homes, and merchants reopened shops. The emperor allocated funds to restore the city's infrastructure, though the process would take years. Artisans created paintings, sculptures, and tapestries commemorating the Great Battle, ensuring that future generations would remember the moment when Europe stood on the brink of collapse and then pulled back through courage and unity. One recurring image in these artworks was the charge of the Winged Hussars. The artists depicted the cavalry descending from the Kahlenberg like an avalanche of steel and feathers. Their wings spread wide, their lances angled toward the heart of the Ottoman army. These portrayals captured the imagination of all who saw them, transforming the Hussars into symbols of unstoppable bravery. Yet behind the glory, the lives of actual Hussar soldiers remained marked by hardships. Many had lost friends or family in the battle. Their horses needed care, their armor repairs, and their bodies rest. But despite these challenges, they remained devoted to their king and their nation, proud of what they had accomplished on the battlefield. The significance of the battle extended far beyond immediate military outcomes. Vienna became the turning point after which the Ottomans would no longer threaten the heart of Europe. In subsequent years, the Holy League expanded its operations, reclaiming key territories and pushing Ottoman forces steadily southward. The Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, however, did not reap long-term rewards equal to its sacrifices. Internal political struggles, economic challenges, and external pressures would eventually weaken it. Yet the memory of Sobieski's leadership at Vienna endured as a testament to the nation's former power and honor. As decades passed, historians, scholars, and military strategists analyzed the battle in great detail. They examined the Ottoman mistakes, such as Kara Mustafa's hesitation to launch a full assault or his failure to anticipate the speed of the Allied advance. They studied the Allied coordination, the terrain advantage from the Kahlenberg, and the tactics employed by Sobieski. The role of the Winged Hussars became a particular focus. Their ability to maintain cohesion during a downhill charge of such magnitude astonished military experts. Their long lances proved especially effective against infantry formations, while their heavy armor allowed them to break through enemy lines with devastating momentum. The psychological impact of their appearance, the wings creating a thunderous sound and an intimidating silhouette, added to their efficacy. Beyond military circles, the battle inspired writers, poets, and storytellers. Legends emerged, embellishing details and transforming real events into near-mythic tales. Children in Poland grew up hearing stories about the Hussars flying down the mountainside, their wings glowing in the sunlight like the feathers of angels. These stories became part of the nation's cultural identity. In the Ottoman Empire, the battle was remembered with sorrow and introspection. Chroniclers documented the errors of leadership, the bravery of Ottoman soldiers who fought against overwhelming force, and the consequences of losing such a crucial confrontation. The empire continued to wage wars, but never again would it mount an offensive of similar scale into Central Europe. For Vienna, the memory of the siege endured for generations. Survivors recounted the hunger, fear, and suffering they had endured, and their testimonies shaped the city's collective consciousness. Monuments were erected in honor of those who had defended Vienna and those who had come to its rescue. Sobieski's letter to his wife, written soon after the victory, became a cherished historical document. In it, he described the charge, the chaos of battle, and the miraculous triumph that had unfolded. His words reflected both the humility and pride of a leader who knew he had played a decisive role in shaping history. As the 18th century progressed, the political landscape of Europe evolved dramatically. New alliances formed, old rivalries reignited, and powerful states like Prussia and Austria rose in influence. Yet the memory of the Battle of Vienna remained a reference point for understanding the shifting tides of power. European leaders recognized the significance of unity during times of crisis. The cooperation between nations that had halted the Ottoman advance became a model for future coalitions. Although such unity was often short-lived, the example set in 1683 continued to inspire diplomatic efforts. In military academies across Europe, officers studied the battle for insights into cavalry tactics and coalition warfare. The Winged Hussars became icons of military excellence, their charge cited in treatises and lectures. Even centuries later, the battle retained its reputation as the largest and most successful cavalry charge in history. The cultural impact extended into modern times. Films, novels, and documentaries retold the story for new generations. Tourists visited the Kahlenberg to see the site where the decisive charge had begun. Museums preserved armor, weapons, and artifacts from the battle, allowing visitors to understand the scale and intensity of the conflict. In Poland, September 12th became a day of remembrance, honoring the courage of Sobieski and his warriors. Ceremonies were held, speeches delivered, and reenactments performed. The Winged Hussars became a symbol of Polish pride, resilience, and identity. Meanwhile, scholars delved deeper into the broader implications of the battle. They argued that if Vienna had fallen, the political, cultural, and religious landscape of Europe might have changed dramatically. The spread of Ottoman influence into Central Europe could have altered the development of nations, institutions, and ideologies. Thus, the victory at Vienna was not merely a military triumph, it was a pivot point in world history. It preserved the balance of power in Europe, halted Ottoman expansion, and set the stage for centuries of transformation that would eventually lead to modern Europe. To this day, the echoes of that September afternoon linger across the plains outside Vienna. The memory of the thunderous hooves, the shattering of enemy lines, and the sight of the Winged Hussars charging with unstoppable force has passed into legend. And though centuries have passed, the story continues to captivate those who seek to understand how a single moment can alter the course of civilization. When historians reflect on the Battle of Vienna, they often return to a simple truth. Europe was saved not by numbers, but by courage, unity, and the daring brilliance of a king who led his cavalry into the heart of an empire. The legacy of that day stands as a reminder of what is possible when determination overcomes fear and when the tide of history is turned by those bold enough to seize their moment. The plains that once echoed with the cries of battle now lie quiet, but beneath their calm surface rests the memory of a clash that shaped continents. Travelers who walk the fields feel an inexplicable weight, a sense that the ground beneath them once bore witness to extraordinary acts of bravery and sacrifice. Generations later, children still learn about the day the Winged Hussars descended from the Kahlenberg. They imagine the feathers, the armor, the lances, and the thunder of hooves. They imagine the fear that gripped the Ottoman ranks and the hope that surged within Vienna's walls. They imagine Sobieski riding at the forefront, his cape billowing, his determination unwavering.